You're listening to episode 319 of Mito Life Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today I'm covering an interesting study from the Nutrients Journal titled Vitamin K2 Holds Promise for Alzheimer's Prevention and Treatment. Ever since I started studying human health, I have had a focus on neurological health. We know people are acting crazy these days. They're very easily triggered by words and ideas that are different from their own. That's a sign of mental illness. But we also have people promoting multi-level marketing pyramid scheme scams, like the company Purium, for example, which is a complete scam, waste of money, crazy markup. And that is also a sign of mental illness. Not having your priorities straight with the supplements that you choose is a sign of being mentally handicapped. That's why on my show, I talk a lot about the power of vitamins, both water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins, the power of minerals, the power of enzyme therapy. This is the stuff that's time-tested. I'm talking about Linus Pauling, Carl Pfeiffer, Abram Hoffer. These are legends that used simple nutrients in powdered form, like ascorbic acid, zinc, and vitamin B3, therapeutically to not only prevent, but reverse many different conditions. And as the owner of a supplement company, I have to obviously be careful with claims, but that's why I have a review section under all the products where you can read customer reviews. And under K2, there's quite a bit on dental, but there's also stuff about healing from a broken ankle. Somebody said that it erased their anxiety. Another person said that it even improved their vision. It makes sense that vitamin K2 would have all of these effects because it is utilized in the mitochondria. Specifically, it affects the process of mitochondrial fission and fusion. It promotes mitophagy, the removal of damaged mitochondria, and it also stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria. They've seen in studies that the MK7 form of vitamin K2 not only reduces inflammation and neuroinflammation in the brain, but it also increases ATP production, energy production, while inhibiting reactive oxygen species production, free radical production. MK4 form of vitamin K2 rescues severe mitochondrial defects. So vitamin K2, both MK4 and MK7, both target the mitochondria, help reverse dysfunction, and essentially act as an antioxidant. Much of what I've learned the last 2 years is off of a screen. It's face-to-face human interaction, talking about health with people in person. Last week, I was at a party and a man was telling me about his son's vitamin K shot and how he made a correlation of his son having neurological problems, namely ADHD symptoms from the vitamin K shot. My issue with shots in general, even the quote unquote healthy IVs that you get at biohacking clinics, like intravenous vitamin C and the Myers cocktail and B vitamins. My problem with those are the forms. They tend to be horrible forms. So instead of P5P, form of vitamin B6, which is called pyridoxine 5-phosphate, instead they give you pyridoxine hydrochloride form of B6, which you'll find in a White Monster energy drink. And this is being injected straight into the veins. So it's not going through the liver and the normal systems of the body to the intestines and the gut bacteria. You're just going straight in. You're forcing it. I am not a fan of needles. I have a past with needles, intramuscular, procaine hydrochloride, the Anna Aslan protocol from Romania. That's a story for another podcast, but I'm done with that. It was not worth it. Maybe it helped me at the time, but piercing the skin with a needle is very stressful, especially IV. And getting back to the vitamin K shot, here's a study, 2023, entitled Injectable Vitamin K Dosing in Extremely Low Birth Weight Infants. So it says the recommended dose of vitamin K for infants is less than 1,500 grams, or 0.3 to 0.5 milligrams per kilogram. Keep in mind, the form of this is phytoandione, which is identical chemically, structurally, to the K1 in my MitoLife product, Purely K, which is phytomenadione. But you're taking it orally, and it's not in isolation. It's in combination with MK4 and MK7. And there's no additives or adjuvants or things that can cause problems down the road, like metals and synthetic compounds that are mixed in with it that are often with these shots. So this man at the party asked me what I recommend when I brought up that I own a supplement company and I study the complex interaction between vitamins and minerals and how to reverse and prevent different conditions using nutrient therapy. He asked me what I recommend to reverse those symptoms from the shot. And my answer is it's not just one thing. It never is, especially with neurological stuff. It's going to be bolstering the system, because who knows what caused those symptoms with this child that were in the shot. Could have been metals, could have been preservatives, who knows? But supporting the body with vitamins and minerals in good forms, straight powders, capsules, pills, orally, you can break them open on your child's food. That is really the way to restore brain function. And whether it's autism or ADHD or any kind of neurological imbalance, it's really going to be that combination of high quality animal foods, ideally eggs from your own chickens or pasture raised eggs, truly pasture raised eggs, grass fed beef, ideally local in season fruits and vegetables, high quality dairy. And then you stack on top of that proper supplementation, and you could really move the needle with mental health, either in children or in adults. I have seen parents have a caution with vitamin K, whether it's K1 or K2, because of their bad experience with the K shot with their child. And they just have to be educated that MK4 and MK7 have profound beneficial effects on mitochondria, and even vitamin K1, which, as I mentioned, it's chemically identical, the one in my supplement to the vitamin K shot. It's the same pharmacokinetics, it's the same route, it's the same safety profile, but it's a different application. It's not MitoLife injectables, it's MitoLife oral capsules, which the body has checks and balances. And like I said, there's no preservatives with it and weird stuff and adjuvants like there are in the weird injections that parents are pressured into giving their child if it's a conventional hospital. There's a lot of education that needs to occur. K1, phenomenal. It's found in leafy greens. K1 plays a pivotal role, a crucial role in blood coagulation. And there's this balance between having too thick of blood and too thin of blood. We want to be somewhere in the middle. In terms of vitamin supplements, people think vitamin K, thickening blood, vitamin E, thinning the blood. And so taking both, you kind of get the best of both worlds because your body has the tools to do what it needs to do. And if you're on systemic enzymes on top of those two, like my dissolvidol product with nattokinase and serrapeptase, that is another blood thinner, but unless you're megadosing it, it is very gentle. It's not going to dangerously thin the blood. And depending on where you are on the philosophical spectrum, I tend to think that most people have blood like ketchup. They have too thick of blood, and that's due to many factors in the modern world. The shots being just one of them, but there's many more even for people that did not get the clot shot. So personally, I take my Purely K product that supports proper blood coagulation. I take vitamin E as well every day at different times of day. Vitamin K2 with one meal and the K1, and vitamin E mixed tocopherol form with another meal. That's the MitoLife PUFA Protect. And then the dissolvidol, the systemic enzymes, I take first thing upon waking on an empty stomach. So I have two things supporting preventing over-thickening of the blood, which is the E and the enzymes, and the vitamin K, which supports the coagulation, which we need that also. Just a quick aside to what causes thickening of the blood: smoking, which I think tobacco is medicinal in the right context if you're taking care of your oral health, but that makes the platelets stickier. Being sedentary, being dehydrated, having excess body fat, being stressed, different diseases, cancer, diabetes, increases the risk of blood clots. Air pollution, which I'm very vocal about, I think that is a huge overlooked problem, is just chronic exposure to pollutants in the city, nitrogen oxides and other fine particulates, and that increases the risk of blood clots and thickens the blood. So there are many things working against us. It doesn't mean that we should cut out all vegetables and limit our K1 intake from supplements. It just means to me that we should be more aware of what we're doing to support thinning the blood, like earthing or grounding while we sleep, like sleeping on a grounding sheet. That helps to thin the blood. Not being sedentary and walking. And I don't think you have to walk on a treadmill while you're recording a podcast like Ben Greenfield. I think that is way overkill. But just getting your walks in every day, ideally around a lot of trees, not restricting carbohydrates, which helps to keep your cortisol down because the stress hormone cortisol will make your platelets more prone to clumping together. And eating enough sugar or carbohydrates and not being ketogenic is just one way to reduce your cortisol, but there's a million ways to do it. For me, it's been being consistent with carbohydrates and just calories in general. Eating enough, for me, the last 2 years, the most stressful time of my life, has been invaluable. And when you combine that with supplements, I am shocked at how grounded I feel in the chaos of this season of my life. Getting back to the main topic here, what is Alzheimer's disease? According to the Alzheimer's Association, it's a type of dementia that affects memory, thinking, and behavior. Alzheimer's disease accounts for 60 to 80% of dementia cases. The majority of people with Alzheimer's are 65 years of age and older, and it's called younger onset Alzheimer's if it affects people under 65. There's a great study entitled Heavy Metal Exposure and Alzheimer's Disease and Related Dementias. It's from the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, a 2020 study. One sentence in the introduction stood out to me. It reads, "Lead and cadmium are notable metals for their neurotoxic effects, even at low levels of exposure encountered in the general population." And it goes on to describe how lead is a known neurotoxin that causes excess oxidative stress, mitochondrial damage, and ultimately the destruction of neurons. And it does this largely by causing overexcitation and overactivation of calcium that throws off the essential minerals, alters normal metal signaling, and that creates neuroinflammation. It even causes epigenetic changes in the brain, which is really scary because it's actually altering gene expression. The study cites several other studies talking about the effects of lead on cognitive function and how it drives Alzheimer's related pathology and memory deficits. And then it also talks about cadmium, how even low level exposure long term increases the risk for kidney damage, osteoporosis, hypertension, lower lung function, and diabetes. And recently it's emerged as a neurotoxin. There's an interesting point about the iron connection with cadmium. Cadmium levels are generally higher in women than in men because low iron increases cadmium absorption. With menstruation and SIBO and intestinal problems and even viral infections, iron deficiency is very common. So I found that relationship really fascinating. Cadmium levels are higher in smokers than non-smokers because tobacco has a high affinity to take up cadmium in the soil. For me, that personally doesn't mean don't ingest tobacco. It just means use it smart and have a protocol around heavy metals. Mine are essentially sweating in a sauna as much as possible, minimum 3 times a week, taking magnesium and zinc every day, which help to counter cadmium, taking shilajit every day, which has fulvic acid, and that has a gentle chelation effect, high dose melatonin every day, and high dose powdered zeolite. That's my current protocol to not only keep metals in check, but actually reverse them and actually remove them from my body, because it usually takes more than one thing to do that safely. I still need to record an entire show of why I smoke a cigar every day. Every single biohacker hones in on nicotine as the only beneficial thing in tobacco. And they're just ignorant because there's something called terpenes, and cannabis connoisseurs are well aware of terpenes because that affects the flavor of the cannabis. And if you know anything about cigars, you know that each one has a different flavor profile. Some are nutty, some have a coffee flavor, some have a chocolate flavor, and that's terpenes. And those have profound health benefits. As far as I know, I am the only person in the natural health world talking about that. Pertinent to the subject of this podcast, which is Alzheimer's disease, which is a form of dementia, the most common form. If you look up smoking, tobacco, Alzheimer's disease, Google it, PubMed, look at the NIH studies, you'll see that most of them talk about how smoking increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease, even doubles it, according to a 2010 study by Cataldo. But then other studies look at nicotine in isolation, like this 2001 Cochrane database systemic review, and it reads, nicotine is a cholinergic agonist, which means promoter, that also has a presynaptic effect in releasing acetylcholine. It has been shown to reverse spatial memory deficits produced in rats by lesions in the medial septal nucleus of their brains. And in aged monkeys, nicotine administration improves memory and alertness to visual stimuli. It goes on, observational studies have suggested a protective effect of smoking against Alzheimer's disease, but recent studies have called this into question. Smoking is a risk factor for stroke and so possibly for vascular dementia. So a lot of the companies selling nicotine products like Prescriptions has it in their blue cannatine product. It's in other nootropic products. People are using Zins a lot, pouches, nicotine patches, because they don't want all of the harm that comes with smoking. I mentioned earlier that tobacco has a strong affinity for cadmium. So yes, your cadmium intake will be higher if you smoke cigarettes or cigars. I opt for cigars because they're cleaner. There's no additives. It's just the tobacco leaf. And I don't care about organic because I've grown tobacco before. It's a carnivorous plant, essentially. I've watched bugs get caked to the sticky leaves and the tobacco absorbs them, just like I've seen my carnivorous plants do over the last couple decades. It just sucks all the liquid out of them, and tobacco loves nitrogen. So that's largely how it gets its nitrogen, by eating insects that land on it. So why would they spray it? That's always my argument with organic cigars. I don't care about organic cigars personally. That tangent aside, the reason why I think that the studies are so different, where some say increases Alzheimer's risk, some say it decreases, is because one, the cadmium, which going back all the way to the start of the show, I talked about cadmium and its connection with Alzheimer's disease. So that's just one aspect, but there's also the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon aspect, just the products of combustion. There's actually studies, if you search PAH, or that long word I just said, it actually affects the brain, reducing cortical thickness potentially, increasing the risk of neurodegeneration, and even increasing the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, all of these other effects. But that's in isolation. And with what we would call a whole food supplement like tobacco, like I mentioned, the terpenes, there's other stuff in there that's balanced. You're not just taking these PAHs, megadosing in isolation. And furthermore, in the studies, if they aren't in isolation, then I ask, what is the vitamin and mineral status of the rodents that are being exposed? Because that really affects the resilience to oxidative stress. So for smokers, it's largely ascorbic acid and vitamin E, mainly alpha tocopherol, but mixed tocopherol is even better because gamma tocopherol balances alpha tocopherol. If you wanted to get crazy, you could take molecular hydrogen, dissolve it in water with those tablets, or inhale it, and that will act like vitamin E and vitamin C. Some people that sell the devices say it's even more powerful. I just always start at the foundation. So I would say if you're playing around with H2 molecular hydrogen inhalation or drinking it, using those dissolving tablets, I wouldn't waste your time with the alkaline ionized Kangen water. That's totally a ripoff, and it's a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme. But if you're going to do the hydrogen biohack or whatever you want to call it, I would do it on top of vitamin C and vitamin E, because those are essential nutrients that are stored in the body. And I've said ad nauseum on the show, vitamin C is stored in the body. People that say you just pee it out don't understand how human physiology works. So when you're constantly topping up your tissue ascorbate levels, you're keeping your vitamin E up. You could assess this using spectrophotometry with the oligoscan, scanning the tissue of your hand, and you could see the status of those two vitamins, as well as correlate it with your heavy metal exposure. So the higher the heavy metal exposure, the more chronic it is, the more on top of your vitamins you need to be on, because those are what mitigate the oxidative stress caused by chronic heavy metal exposure. I think the cadmium piece of tobacco smokers is huge. I think that's why a lot of the research shows that smoking is not good for long-term health of the brain because of that metal that really throws a wrench in mitochondrial function in several ways, damaging the electron transport chain, increasing reactive oxygen species production, decreasing ATP synthesis, affecting multiple organs in the body. And you would imagine that most people smoking cigars are not taking the proper supplements. Maybe they're taking fish oil. Maybe they're taking Costco supplements or supplements they're promoted by big names in the health space that don't really matter. They're not taking the foundational stuff, the orthomolecular medicine stuff, the vitamin E, the vitamin C, the vitamin K2. Magnesium's popular now, finally. Shilajit, same thing. Those are essential nutrients that you should be taking every single day. I would also add zinc and melatonin to the list as daily essential nutrients. And those last two I mentioned, as well as magnesium and shilajit, these all have effects to protect you from cadmium exposure. And if you're using tobacco like I am daily for antiparasitic effects and cognitive benefit, then you have to mitigate it. And my personal strategy, all the supplements I just said, halotherapy, which isn't the same as breathing hydrated salt at the beach. It's dry salt and it's micron size, below 5 micron, whereas the beach, the salt gets bigger and bigger as it moves towards you and collects water in a chamber, grinding dry salt and emitting it into the chamber. It's a totally different effect, and it is a total lung clean out. So I've started using that again recently from Salt Chamber Inc., and it is such an important thing to do if you smoke regularly. And you could also high dose zeolite. As I mentioned, check out the first show that I did with Jeff Hoyt. If you search YouTube, MitoLife Radio, zeolite, you'll see the first show I did with him. And that's a 2-hour great breakdown debunking myths about zeolite supplementation. For a lot of people, that will be too much. It's just too much work. I have to get a salt booth. I have to take all these supplements. I have to mitigate it in all these different ways. I'm just going to make life easier and not smoke. And that's completely fine. I'm not promoting that every single person smoke tobacco. But the lozenges, the patches, just be careful with the additives in there and just understand that it's not equivalent to tobacco. You're not getting the whole food supplement, as I said earlier. You're not getting the beneficial terpenes that are never talked about. By this point, hearing me mention terpenes a bunch of times, they're probably saying, well, you haven't named one. Well, here's one. It's actually the most common found in tobacco. It's called solanisol. And solanisol is a key intermediate for synthesizing supplements like coenzyme Q10 and vitamin K2, which I'm going to talk more about here in a minute. But it also is antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and acts as an antioxidant. It's been explored as a potential treatment for cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, and even HIV. It's a non-cyclic terpene alcohol that's also found in potatoes and tomatoes, which are in the same family as tobacco, called Solanaceae. But amongst all Solanaceae plants, tobacco has the highest solanisol content. And connecting it back to Alzheimer's, there was an interesting study at the end of February of 2025 by ACS Publications by Wang et al. That talked about solanisol and chlorogenic acid being assembled into nanomicelles, which I'm not a fan of liposomal and that sort of technology. But they use that with 808 nanometer light, which is infrared light, and they showed a reduction in beta amyloid aggregation. Beta amyloid plaque is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease and inflammation. And chlorogenic acid is a compound in coffee. And both tobacco and coffee get demonized very often by purists in the health community. But they are two of the most affordable and effective medicines for various different conditions, but largely neurological. Alzheimer's disease affects 6.2 million Americans, and that number is expected to double by the year 2050. There's at least 50 million people worldwide that live with dementia. Like I mentioned a minute ago, beta amyloid is a plaque that's composed of a protein called beta amyloid. It's a peptide fragment derived from a larger protein, and it accumulates in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease. And there's a second hallmark of Alzheimer's disease, abnormal structures. They're called intraneuronal neurofibrillary tangles, or tau protein tangles for short. So we have these things called microtubules, which are parts of the cell's cytoskeleton, and they maintain cell structure and transport of proteins and organelles. And we have tau proteins, which normally bind to those microtubules and help prevent them from breaking down, called depolymerizing, and promotes their assembly into stable structures, especially within the axons, which are the long projections of nerve cells. Now, there are some scientists that challenge the essentiality of tau proteins. There's a great study called Tau, It's Not What You Think, from 2020 by Peter Baas, B-A-A-S. And it goes into how we give tau proteins too much credit. And it says, contrary to tau dogma, when tau is depleted from neurons, the stable domain is no less stable, but the labile domain becomes shorter and more stable. And it talks about this protein called MAP6. And when tau is depleted, that is a genuine stabilizer of the microtubules, and it's expressed more highly. It binds to the microtubules more strongly. And that is an explanation of why the labile domain becomes more stable when tau is depleted. And just for context, if I lost you, what is he talking about? Labile domain. So these microtubules have basically a positive and a negative. And the labile domain is like the positive end that's less stable, it's more dynamic. And the stable domain is the side that is less dynamic. It doesn't change as much. It's more resistant to this process called depolymerization, and it's found on the minus end of the microtubule. I know this is a side note challenging whether we even need the tau protein, whether it's beneficial, but I just wanted to bring that up just to let the super nerds know that I'm aware of this argument, and more importantly, just making the point that we think that certain things are set in stone in biology. Ray Peat questioned the essentiality of N-3 fatty acids as a crucial part of health. And I still challenge that to this day. I think they have benefit for people in colder climates, but do we need to down fish oil like Rhonda Patrick recommends? I don't think so. So things are always changing. I've been called a flip-flopper many times over the years, especially by the Ray Peat community when I decided to do 1 year of a low-carb diet post trying Ray Peat's information. And I got basically crucified and ostracized by the Ray Peat community, which is ridiculous. Everybody should have the right to experiment, even when it flies in the face of what they believe is true. I think that is where real knowledge comes from. It's through experimentation. So let's talk about vitamin K and vitamin K2. So vitamin K1 only exists in one form, but vitamin K2 exists in multiple what are called isoforms. You have short chain K2, that's MK4 through MK6, intermediate chain, which is MK7 through MK9, and long chain, which is MK10 through MK13. The number for each of those corresponds to the number of unsaturated 5-carbon groups that they contain. Both vitamin K1 and vitamin K2 are both cofactors of an enzyme called gamma glutamyl carboxylase, which is involved in the activation of a set of proteins called vitamin K-dependent proteins. You have C, S, and Z proteins. The S1, a liver vitamin K-dependent protein, has an essential role in protecting your brain cells from excitotoxic injury. It's been found to protect the integrity of the blood-brain barrier. You have other proteins that are vitamin K-dependent called coagulation factors. I talked earlier about blood clotting and the balance using things like vitamin E, systemic enzymes, and vitamin K to support the body in maintaining balance of blood viscosity, and how vitamin K is required for blood coagulation, which is also necessary because if our blood is too thin, that's also a problem. But in one study, it actually found that one of these vitamin K-dependent proteins actually is anti-thrombotic, which means that it actually prevents blood clotting. And that's one of the fears that I've heard online by one doctor that has been promoting enzyme therapy and vitamin E therapy for years. I heard him do a lecture on vitamin K supplementation and why he thinks it's dangerous to go over 1 gram a day because most people have too thick of blood. But he probably doesn't know that protein S exists, that it's dependent on vitamin K, and that it is anti-thrombotic. The most well-known vitamin K-dependent proteins are called matrix GLA protein, osteocalcin, and growth arrest specific protein, or GAS6. And the matrix GLA protein inhibits the calcification of soft tissue, so it directs calcium where it's supposed to go. Osteocalcin is required for proper bone health. It regulates glucose metabolism, testosterone production, cognitive function. And this is something that people don't understand about these seemingly simple vitamin supplements. Vitamin K2, vitamin E, they're acting on so many different proteins in the body to help keep it in balance. And the whole ancestral argument goes out the window that we shouldn't take supplements in isolation. They should only be in whole food form. When you consider the modern problems that require modern solutions, we have ubiquitous heavy metal toxicity, and we need the right supplementation to counter that. The oxidative stress that comes from that, and a detox routine that's continually getting these metals out of us, namely cadmium and lead as it pertains to Alzheimer's disease prevention, but other metals too, mercury, arsenic, aluminum. We're inundated with these from all different angles. One of the mechanisms that scientists have found how vitamin K2 helps prevent Alzheimer's disease is through one of those vitamin K dependent proteins called growth arrest specific protein 6, or GAS6 for short. And they found that that has a powerful effect on beta amyloid. That hallmark of Alzheimer's leads to neuronal death by apoptosis, and it's directly toxic. And the neurotoxicity occurs through calcium disruption, oxidative stress, and mitochondrial dysfunction. They found cells exposed to beta amyloid but pre-treated with vitamin K2 showed markedly less apoptosis, also known as cell death, and also an increased amount of glutathione, one of the body's master antioxidants. Another mechanism is the inactivation of a pathway called the P38 MAP kinase pathway, and that's yet another mechanism of how K2 protects from Alzheimer's disease. A lot of these studies have shown vitamin K2 is essentially acting as an anti-apoptotic. It's preventing apoptosis, and it's also acting as an antioxidant. And that antioxidant effect, reducing things like microglial inflammation and reducing the production of inflammatory cytokines. That's been shown in both the MK4 and the MK7 form of vitamin K2. It's even been shown to increase ATP or energy production in the cell, even when astrocytes are hypoxic, meaning lacking oxygen, which could happen with soft tissue calcification or fibrosis, like I talk about in my CLF protocol. So astrocytes are a subtype of glial cells, and glial cells are what allow nerve cells to stay in place and help them function as they should. You have oligodendrocytes, microglial cells, and astrocytes are the majority of the cells in the central nervous system. This has implications for Parkinson's disease prevention, which is a disease that affects the central nervous system. So vitamin K can help there as well. There's also a huge gut health connection with Alzheimer's disease, and microbiome disruption contributes to the development of Alzheimer's disease and almost every other disease. But the connection with vitamin K2 is very interesting because the human gut can actually synthesize vitamin K2. It can make its own metoquinone. Is it enough to counter all of the modern pollution and the imbalance that's created by being a human in today's world? I don't think so. But back in the day when I was a vegan, that was one of the arguments that was used, is that we don't need vitamin K2 from our diet because if you have a healthy gut, you will make it. But some studies have shown that antibiotic treatment in mice eradicated the gut bacteria that make vitamin K2, which led to a vitamin K deficiency, obviously, and also gastric hemorrhage. When we think of gut health, we often think of probiotics, but K2 has been shown to increase beneficial gut bacteria and reduce intestinal inflammation. Type 2 diabetes has been shown to be a comorbidity in Alzheimer's disease, and supplementation with vitamin K2 reduces insulin resistance in people with type 2 diabetes. And a lot of studies have shown that that's due to that osteocalcin vitamin K dependent protein that's activated. Depression is another comorbidity with Alzheimer's disease. Up to 50% of Alzheimer's patients have depression. And one study showed that vitamin K2 prevents the development of depression and anxiety. I know I kind of went shotgun at the end here with a lot of the effects of K2, but there's so much. I tried to make this episode succinct, and I just wanted to highlight the importance of this simple supplement, because when I hear big names recommending supplements and talking about their supplement protocol, very rarely do I see just K2 by itself on the list. It's always with vitamin D or in a multivitamin, but never by itself in high enough doses. And during COVID times, I was screaming from the mountaintops to all the people that were megadosing cholecalciferol, vitamin D3, which I think has its place. I don't think it's inherently a poison, but people taking tens of thousands of IUs daily for months will definitely cause imbalances, mainly with depleting magnesium and vitamin K2. And I talked to people during those times that were megadosing it, and they were definitely not taking both of those supplements, or if they were in very low doses. As a former raw vegan myself, I've inspired a lot of vegans or even just vegetarians to bring more balance to their life by supplementing the right things. One of the big ones is vitamin K2. In the depth of my raw vegan experiment, when I was essentially fruitarian, I chipped my tooth with a glass, because I was only drinking out of glass, at a glass vessel, and I very gently brought it up to my mouth and I chipped my front tooth. And that would not have happened if I had vitamin K2 coming in. When I started taking vitamin K2 consistently, and a lot of people report the same effect, my teeth felt stronger, and they still feel strong. And yes, I do brush my teeth with clean fluoride toothpaste. I am a fan of fluoride. I tried hydroxyapatite. It did not work for me. Maybe it can work for you, but it doesn't work for everybody. And I mitigate the potential harmful effects of fluoride by supplementing accordingly and keeping my body in balance. But dental health is so important. Nobody likes going to the dentist, and everything that we can do to prevent periodontal disease and damaging our gums and enamel, we should stack as much as we possibly can, because we know chronic infections in the mouth affect the heart, they affect our blood sugar regulation. Unchecked infections in our teeth are essentially a risk factor for every disease. I know when I finally got dental work done, my highly sensitive CRP, which is a big inflammatory marker, went down significantly. And I credit that to getting dental fillings that I was putting off for many years. Fortunately, I didn't need root canals, and I credit that largely to vitamin K2 supplementation. Lately, I've only been taking 1 capsule a day. It's a very affordable supplement that way. The one that I sell from Vitalife is a month's supply. If you do it that way for $50, and you're getting a huge amount, more than I've seen in any other supplement brand, of a balance of K1, MK4, and MK7. So in my Vitalife product, it's 1,000 micrograms of vitamin K1, which people can be deficient in that one, especially the carnivores that don't eat any greens. They are most likely deficient in vitamin K1. There's menaquinone 4, 2,000 micrograms, and MK7 derived from a bacteria that's 400 micrograms. And while a lot of people take multivitamins where everything's all together, there is some research to show that fat-soluble vitamins compete for absorption. So I personally take vitamin E separate from my vitamin K2. So I take Purely K from Vitalife separate from PUFA Protect, which are the names for those products. Is it a huge deal? Probably not. But if you want to get the most bang for your buck and make sure you're absorbing all of it, then I would take them with separate meals. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope you got a lot out of the show. People seem to enjoy these more than the Q&As, my long in-depth rants on different nutrients. Expect a lot more of this. I finally found some good guests for the next couple weeks. So I'm going to try to get back on track with the one show every Friday release. Check out my website if you are intrigued, you're a new listener and you want to learn more about what I talk about. It's matt-blackburn.com. You can read about my CLF protocol there on top. If you click on the shop tab, you can see all of my recommended products, things that I've found over the years that have helped me. It's a great resource for birthday shopping or Christmas shopping. Most of them have discount codes, and at least half of the products on that website have a podcast linked to them. So if you go to YouTube, it's kind of like my podcast archive. You can search for what it is, Vitalife Radio, and usually there's a show attached to it. My brand's called Vitalife. You can find that at mitolife.co. There's a bunch of products on there ranging from shampoo and conditioner that's super clean with zero synthetics, grounding sheets, which are amazing to change your sleep rod to earth, and then a lot of different products that I've come out with the last 5 years, digestive enzymes, systemic enzymes, my favorite forms of nutrients. As I mentioned, the mixed tocopherol form of vitamin E. I import shilajit resin straight from Russia. It costs me a whole lot of money. I third-party lab test it. I recently found a quote-unquote competitor's website for shilajit paste, and the lab report was a joke. It was so blurry that you couldn't even read it. I test for not only metals, but you could actually see the levels of calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, copper, iodine, iron, selenium, and zinc in my product, which I haven't seen other Shilajit brands do. And that's one of my essential supplements that I recommend for everybody. I personally take 5 tablets or 1 gram every day, and it's one of the most important supplements that you could take. I basically started with that and magnesium as my foundation for years. And it was only about 7 years later that I started adding in systemic enzymes, vitamin E, vitamin K2, and then recently high dose melatonin, zinc, vitamin C, lithium, not necessarily a high dose of all of those, but maybe cycling high dose of certain things. That's something that I always encourage people to experiment with. It's very hard to do damage high dosing almost any supplement if it's only for a couple days or a week. It's really a lot of these studies that show the damaging effects of isolated supplements. It's people that have been taking high doses for 1 year, 2 years straight. Then you're causing an imbalance in other nutrients, and that's where the problem begins. But that's why I educate a lot about these nutrient interactions and how to keep everything in balance. You can find me on Instagram, Matt Blackburn. I've been posting there for well over a decade. MitoLife on Instagram if you want to stay up to date on things. And there's a new show released every Friday. At least that's what I shoot for in the chaos of my life and building out this 100 acres and renovating an underground bunker. I definitely couldn't live this lifestyle and stay sane without nutritional supplements. So I'm very grateful to have found all this information that enables me to do what I'm doing. So until next time, stay supercharged.